in Chicago during that time, which the Depression was on. He tried to buy, steal, to get a job any way he could. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine got me a job with a company called Atlas Engineering. And in that group, there was a chap named Al Jensen. So we became friends. And but Al Jensen, prior to coming to work there, had worked for a group called Peller Pie Company, which owned by Matt and Ralph Peller. And they had sold this to the Chicago Pie Company, and he bought everything except this boat, the Francis P. Ritchie. So after that, they, as I remember the story, lounged around, and finally they decided to go into the gasoline business, which they did. And then they went to Florida with the rest of the pigeons for the winter and said, "This is it, forget that Chicago." So they said, "Well, what we'll do, we'll cut the whole facility up, load aboard this boat, and take it to Miami, Florida, and we'll run gasoline between between Port Arthur, Texas, and Miami, Florida." So the first thing we had to do was overhaul this boat and build tanks for it and all this. So Al, they put valves back on it because in their business he was kind of a handyman, could fix anything and everything. But in our conversation with one another, he had found out that I had worked on diesels. So immediately he told the brothers, says, "I need a helper." So that's where I got hired into it. And that lasted for a while until the brothers, every time they come on board, would find Al sitting there watching me, and they figured I didn't need watching, so they canned him. Oh. So we finished the boat up, and I got my brother on, and another kid in this little town I was living in at that time, called Lomax, Illinois, and the two brothers. So there were just five of us on board for the trip. Mm-hmm. My brother and this Ray Van Honey, who was the other one, and these two brothers, brother-in-law, and the two brothers took 3 or 4 truckloads of equipment and hauled it down to Miami, Florida, and I stayed on the boat all alone, still working on it. And they come back, and we only put tanks in the after part of it. In the bow we didn't put any tanks because this is where we had all sorts of machinery and metal and pumps and motors and you name it. Mm-hmm. And had even one truck that was put on deck the last thing. And we left Chicago on the 23rd of August, 1910, headed for Ludington, Michigan. The reason I remember it so well, that's my birthday. I turned 21 between Chicago and Ludington, Michigan. And as I said, all my life, if my mother knew who I was, she sent me a card, or if she was any one of those things, she had some little something for me. And it was the first time it occurred that wasn't so, and I almost laid down the second ball when I remembered my birthday. Nobody even said happy birthday to me. So they gave me a good fix in time of when this occurred. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't remember how long we were in Ludington, Michigan, and we took off of that on our way to Miami, Florida, went up through the Straits. Coming down through Lake Huron there, we hit this blow coming out of Saginaw Bay. And the owner gave orders to turn with us. Now, I was what you call a trainee captain, because I was supposed to take this boat over when we got to Miami, Florida, and physically run it between Port Arthur, Texas, and Miami. Mm-hmm. And they were negotiating for a larger boat, about 550 feet, I remembered, that after they got this sort of established, then they were going to take this bigger boat and run between Port Arthur, Texas, and Miami, and the smaller boat was going to run between Miami and Cuba. That was before we was mad at Cuba, or they was mad at us. So anyway, he gave orders to turn, and I tried to talk him out. I said, "Look, we have no reason to head for Canada. We don't have papers to go into Canada." I said, "We got plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of fuel, just hove to and wait to storm out." I said, "It can't last forever." "Nope, going to Canada." Well, what his big problem was, he was getting a little seasick.
Someone who had been on the sea was getting seasick.
Oh, it can happen. The person says, "I've never been seasick." He just hadn't been out to sea that many times. I think you vouch for that. So we ran the rest of that afternoon and that night Oh, that was last night, 50 years ago. I'll tell you, that was a wild night if you ever seen one. We broached twice that night. Once was violent enough to put me right out of my berth on the deck. Brakes gone, beautiful day, sun shining, but this lake still standing on end. And my brother was on the helm most of the time that night. And he says, his orders was to hold the most comfortable course. If you can hold a comfortable course with a storm on your stern. So when we sighted land, he says, turn and go north. And that my brother said, I've held a much more northerly course than what you had laid out. So then the next thing, we pick up this little lighthouse. So he gets out this book, and of course I'm in the act too, since I'm a trainee. And he says, Kincardine. I said, the lighthouse looks too short for Kincardine. I said, I don't believe that's Kincardine. He said, well, you can miss the height of something out to sea, and there's no argument against that. So Kincardine, as I understand, you sail right straight into it. So he started into it, and I went down below a standby, because it was that close in, and it was an engine telegraph control system, not from the helm like a lot of small boats are. I just leaned over to whistle up time I stand by for him. Crash, we hit this thing, and it sounded like we skidded a city block. And clean, clang, clang, full speed power reverse, which I gave him. Water started pouring in from the stern, and the two counter-rotating flywheels, next thing, just throwing water all over the engine, couldn't see anything. So I called up and asked for my assistant engineer, which is this Ray Van Heining. I said, send my brother down too. I turned on the electric bilge pump, and I put him on a hand bilge. He was terrified. A couple of years prior, he almost drowned. I'm not doing any good. And I said, Wallace, I said, we're fighting a delaying action here. Every drop is out, it's just that much slowed down. And I told Ray to get some gunny sacks and sit down between these two flywheels and stop the water being thrown out of the engine room. And no other response from the helm, from the wheelhouse. And the water getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And I look back, it's strange how a person, you give them a camp command, and he'll stay right there to the death. My brother kept moaning, I'm doing no good, I'm going topside. Stay there, stay there. Well, I got it deep enough for the one mill on the starboard side conked out. And still nothing from the wheelhouse. Because I didn't call up either, just waiting for some command. Mm-hmm. So the other started sputtering, and I said, well, we haven't got much more time for power, so I whistled up and no response. So I told this Ray, I says, apparently everybody's at the wheelhouse. And I said, we don't have much more time for power here, so we just want to go up. So he stands up to come aft. In the meantime, this little catwalk between the two engines floated away. He takes one step forward and just disappeared. I've never seen two bigger white eyes in my life when he came up. He makes a grab, hits the two hot diesels, yeah, and down he goes again. Next time he comes with a good old-fashioned dog paddle coming out. So we go up topside, and here are the two brothers and my brother back there trying to put the quadrant back on the rudder. Just what had happened, they'd hit it and popped this thing off, and immediately they realized they didn't have any helm response. So without telling me where I was going or changing any command in the engine room, they took off. Now I understand there was an anchor down. Isn't that what you were telling me?
Yeah.
So there must have been some time here that they threw an anchor over, and I don't know why. Mm-hmm. You'd think if they put an anchor over, they'd call down and said, stop doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? Since I got full power reverse. But who knows? Anyhow, so look, fellow, forget it. I said, we're out of power. What do we do now? I said, well, let's get one of the boats down. And which one? I said, well, the one here's on the leeward. The boat is yaw slightly, and the storm is coming mainly in over the port quarter. So Matt Peller and I got up topside, swung the davits out, lowered the boat down. And the first guy in the boat was the captain, Ralph Peller. And this Ray Van, I get your, you can edit it out. I saw that boat, I said, my brother can't swim a lick. He came out there like a drowned rat. Between being horribly ashamed of himself what he was doing. So I held on to Ray. I said, as soon as you get in the water, I said, pull us clear of the boat so we don't get smashed against the boat. He pulled out, and the weather caught him, and he was laying on the oars for everything, and he's still going towards shore. About the time I saw this gentleman coming out toward us, I just waited to go on in. So they came out, threw us a line, made it fast, and threw us another line, which we attached to ourselves. and we had put on a cork life jacket. But this time the stern is down, the water's coming up and running damn near up over the bow because the stern is underwater. When you came out the cabin door, you had to look to see what you're going to get your feet washed out from under you. And then we out a great big old trunk and threw it in the water, which I remembered to throw in the water, but never could remember what happened to it after that. So I said, well, we better put on another life jacket. So we put another cork life jacket on, and they said, at the count of 3, we'll go. And I didn't want to go. Because I've been a lousy diver all my life, even today. If I dive into the water, I go down like a stone for some reason or other. So realizing when I did hit the water, I give it a good stroke up, and my gosh, I popped out of the water all stuff up to my knees with these 2 cork life jackets. So they pulled us on over to the boat, and they got the 2 brothers in fairly easy. I remember with me they had a problem with because this jacket kept hooking into the rub rail, and when I get it clear, they wouldn't pull, and then when the wave would drop out from me, I'd drop into the boat, then they'd pull. Almost my arms parted the body. But they got us on board, and we pulled away, I'd say 100 yards or maybe less than that, and this thing just slid right out of sight.
How much time would have lapsed in between the time when you had your collision and when you were safe?
Have you ever been under high stress and tried to tell me how it's been stated here? I wouldn't have the slightest idea.
It probably seems like an eternity when you think back.
It seems that, well, my concept of time would have been something like 30 minutes maybe. He'd have a better idea than me.
Mr. McLeod, how did you find out about this vessel being in trouble, and how did you get involved with it?
Well, we were working at nets down there, and we'd been home for dinner. So when I was coming back, I noticed this strange boat out there. Well, I knew there was something wrong right away, for she shouldn't be there. So my 2 cousins were down there. So there was 2 steam tugs here then, but it was blowing too hard in the morning for anybody to go out, so their steam was down. They just had their fires banked. Well, it's up us to get out there as fast as we could. So we met the 2 fellows in the dinghy. So we asked them, is anybody else aboard? Yeah, there's 3 more. So we went out. We couldn't go alongside them, for she was thrashing back and forth. So we threw them a line. I think you had the line fast somewhere, didn't you?
I made the line fast, yeah.
And I'd keep her up as close as I could with the motor, but I had to stay away a safe distance from the boat.
Right.
So the other 2 fellows, they dumped the trunk in first. So we got a hold of it. And Hick Madison, he was with us. And he thought this trunk was full of liquor. And we're pulling aboard, and the water is running out of it down on. Easy, boys, easy, he says, you don't want to break it. So we got the other 2 fellows, they jumped right in, but this fellow, he had cold feet. We had quite a time.
No, I had dry feet.
We had quite a time convincing him to jump in when he could follow the line to our boat. Yeah.
Tell me, was there liquor in that trunk?
Pardon?
Was there liquor in the trunk?
No, I don't know what it was.
You don't even remember it.
No, well, the trunk wasn't opened. Not out there. Not, just came ashore, I guess.
I guess I remember throwing the trunk in, but I never remember it ever being pulled out. Because this phase of it, I don't know. It's well, as I said, when the boat went down, I got the dangest case of the shakes you ever seen.
Right.
And the next thing that I can remember is being in this hotel, and he drove me by a hotel. I said, I feel that was the hotel that we were taken to, because I don't ever remember this boat landing. I never remember getting out of the boat, coming on shore, nothing. The next thing I have remembrance of, can you imagine what I saved off this vessel? A packet of love letters. And I remember sticking these up in the window in the hotel there so they dry out. Then when we left, I went off and left them.
And you don't know where they are today. They're gone.
I'd like to. To save my fine name.
Right. Mr. McLeod, what was the location of the ship then when it went down? And where did you actually pick up the survivors?
Well, I imagine it was maybe halfway between the outside gasway here and the island.
Well, as I recall what we saw, then the big lighthouse was here, and there was a sandy beach along here. And other than for that, now the only lighthouse that looks like the one that I remember is that big old one out there.
On the island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the owner told me later that he saw the buoy of the reef just before he hit it. He had no time to change course or nothing. And I expect, having done a lot of sailing since then, that he saw this reef and immediately he realized he wasn't where he thought he was. And panic, which way did I go, you know what I mean? And whether he might couldn't figure out whether he should turn right or left or go straight up, it'd be the safest direction. Which he didn't do, so consequently it just wound up a total loss. And I understand that after the storm subsided, there was about 3 feet of the mast left sticking out. And the brothers came back that spring, hoping to salvage it. And they said the deck came in that winter, so they said just wrote it off as a loss.
Right.
We had some freshwater barrels on deck, and they floated in. You see people with their heads down and sniffing around. Everyone thought we had booze on board. Even this gentleman to this day.
Tanks come ashore, why, that made it all the more suspicious.
Yeah.
Because he asked me the other day, he said, what was really in those tanks? I said, fuel was in it. It sure wasn't booze in it. No.
You'd have a lot of disappointed people on the shore.
Because I remember down on the beach that night, it smelled gasoline like crazy. These were semi-diesels, but they'd run on gas, or you could get them started on gas and then switch them over to diesel. But the reason we were burning gas was because of the moving of this bulk gas station. They took everything that they had on board and filled these tanks with it for fuel to Florida, rather than truck it down and rather fill it out with any diesel on it. So it had gas in it. And in fact, after the boys got off, I said, what do we do now? I said, let's pump the tanks. I said, hell no. I said, let them fill, leave them full of the fuel, hope the boat will fill and get it down the bottom instead of sitting here pounding. Because I know one of the gentlemen on your boat, you said you thought we were going to break in half before we got off. We got off because when it's dropping, they say I could see the vessel, this hinge.
She'd raise on the seas, and when the sea would leave her, down she'd go.
That's right.
And you were watching this and not knowing really how many people were on board or whether you'd even be able to save anybody who was getting off board.
Well, we didn't know anything about who was aboard till we met the dinghy. 2 fellows in the dinghy, and they said there's 3 more aboard of her. So. Yeah.
This is the first time you've been back
First time.
to Canada in 50 years. What brought you back this time?
I was aware of the wreck, but I didn't know for sure, and I found this in my mother's things. She's passed away since then. And it was folded up, and I very carefully unfolded it, that's why I see it like this, because it just falls to pieces after this many years.
Right.
But I'm not too jokingly saying my mother never throws anything away. She saves everything. And she was telling me one time, kind of a little joke on herself, she says, I have a friend of mine, she says, it's kind of like me, never throws anything away, except she is labels it very carefully. And she says, she has one drawer that's labeled string, too short to use. They just must be some of these people around here yet. I know 50 years is a long time, but and I wasn't really sure of the date until I saw there that it was the 31st of August. I knew it was somewhere around the 1st of September, but I didn't know exactly. And then in the same little group of antiques or souvenirs from my mother, there was a letter that I wrote to my sister dated September the 2nd. So it means that I couldn't have been here hardly much overnight. Now, I do remember going back across the border, because we had no papers or nothing. Well, your paper don't have any. And then he started telling me about this wreck we'd had, and he said, oh, yes, I read about that in the paper. So between that, he let us back across with no problem. So it wasn't very late. I tried to have it Xerox, it wasn't Xerox, most of it just turned black. So I had my sister, my brother-in-law's wife, type it off, and I added some stuff to the top here, which you can have this if you want it. There are mistakes in the thing where it says that we had wallowed around there without any power for 3 days. We hit that reef going full steam ahead.
So even back 50 years, the press wasn't always as accurate as we should be.
Well, then you won't feel too wounded if I say every time in my life that I have been somewhere where there was something newsworthy, The only reason I was sure it was the time, place, and date.
And he's the only.
Other than that, they take all sorts of liberties.
Right. Mr. McLeod, did you have many opportunities like this to go out and rescue other ships or vessels? No. Was this the only one?
Hmm.
Do you think about it, or over the past 50 years, have you thought about it very much?
Well, there was a lady in town here who was asking me about the Ritchie 2 weeks ago. Whether she'd been reading some article in a old newspaper, I don't know what come about, but she was asking me about the Francis Ritchie.
Have you ever written down any of your memories of that particular event? It's time you did it.
Yeah, you better hurry.
Have you had contact with the other men who were on the boat over the last 50 years?
No, none at all. In fact, until I read this article, which is a couple of months ago, I didn't even remember what their names were. Mm-hmm. But the reason that I was fairly sure of the accuracy of that part of it was my remembrance of about 6 men on board of this boat that rescued us. Mm-hmm. And so that tied in fairly well, that there just wasn't 1 man or 2 men or what.
Right.
There was about 6 men on board that picked us up.
Mm-hmm. Coming back to Southampton this time, have you gone down to the beach? Have you been out on the water and had a look around?
I've been on the water, but I was supposed about this afternoon, didn't it?
I just saw Lynn coming in now with his fishing boat.
Yeah.
We'll have to make
And I
arrangements.
was hoping to get out there and about somewhere near the spot that I remember, and take a picture about it just for nostalgic reasons.
Wonderful.
Nothing more than that.
Wonderful.
But
Tell me, when you did get back to the States, did you start on the boats again?
tried to. But in 1931, the only way I think you could get a berth on a boat was to buy one. Because jobs were hard to come by.
Uh-huh.
I did make an effort though to get back out to sea. Mm-hmm. I liked it, and but as I say, it was just futile. So
How have you spent this last 50 years then? What kind of activities have you involved yourself with?
mainly engineering, and I was almost 20 years with California Institute of Technology. About 10 of that was with the Caltech Co-op wind tunnel, and the last was with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Have you done much traveling?
Yeah.
By ship?
Well, I went around the world in '76, and that was mainly flying, but we did take a hydrofoil out of Hong Kong and went over to Macau, and took the ferry back and forth to Kowloon. Mm-hmm. You call that? Did take a ship across the Nile.
But it hasn't been your first priority, getting back on a ship for
Oh, yeah,
pleasure.
almost. Well, let's see, I started getting very active in sailing in, the late 40s, and mainly racing. Mm-hmm. But, I did a lot of chartering with taking people out, for weekends.
Right.
Did that for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And did quite a lot of scuba diving, fishing, deep sea fishing.
The sea's been very much a part of your life then.
Well, I started off deep sea fishing, and then got into scuba diving, and then got into sailing, sort of in that order. Mm-hmm. And after I got into scuba diving, I said, this fishing, you can see all the lines down, bobbing around in a fishing sideshow. So this is the way to go. I was tempted several times, if I could figure out some way I could snag this time all together, have lift the boat right out of the water.
Mr. McLeod, what have you been doing for the past 50 years? Is the water still part of your life?
It's the biggest part of it. I was sailing on the Great Lakes freighters for 10 seasons, and I was fishing for around 40 years. Mm-hmm. We had a commercial fishing outfit out of here.
I see. Do you still have a boat now?
No.
Do you spend time on the water, though, with other people on the boat?
Oh, once in a while I go out with some of the boys.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you very much.
I'm liable to get seasick this afternoon.
Won't be held against you, tell you that. I can't figure out. One of the last things that was put aboard before the hatch was put down was my